Howdy y'all, welcome to my channel. Today I will be sharing with you how I created this Eclipse style thank you card. So let's begin. So we have printed out our image and we have printed it out on mask paper as well, because I'm going to color this image in an unconventional sort of way. But first we need to cut the mask out. So I use rock label paper, and I will have a link in the description box below for the specific type of rock paper that I use. So now we're going to stick it back on its backing, and then we're going to fussy cut our mask. And we're only concerned with keeping the parts that are outside of the flower design. And I'm going to use my ergonomic Fiskars scissors to help me with cutting this piece out. So we just spent all that time cutting our mask, and yes, I know we're not covering up the flowers, we're covering up the outside of the flowers, the exterior portion of the flowers, and that's because we're going to color in a different way from how I normally do. Today we are going to bring in some makeup brushes, and these are the rarely used sizes of makeup brushes. That's what I consider them. They're going to help us create this scene on our card. So we started out, this is a digital print. Now we're going to bring in our coloring mediums, which are distress ink. We're going to use distress ink today to color up this image. So we're going to begin by using cracked pistachio and this little tiny brush head right here. So we're going to show you how to use this particular brush today. So we're just going to go in and use this brush to help us color the leaves. I know I didn't do the branch part, but that's because we're going to do that bit using this brush actually. Now as we color this, you will notice that some areas didn't exactly get the masking on it, and that's just because I still wanted it to feel a little bit more organic than just a perfect little piece. So that's why some areas don't actually have the mask, whereas some areas do. Okay, now we're going to go in with this brush that's the bristles on it make the brush very narrow, and we're going to bring in the color Mowed Lawn to help us out with the coloring. Now we're going to bring in worn lipstick. That's going to help us color in our flowers. Now that we've got our flowers colored, we're actually going to go back in with, we're bringing in wild honey, and that's going to be for the center of our flowers. There you go. And now we're going to bring in the color Candied Apple, and that's going to help us create a cohesive look, because it's going to be similar to how we brought in the Mowed lawn over our leaves. Now I want to go back in with some more of the worn lipstick. Okay, and I'm going to bring in some more cracked pistachio. Now we're going to remove our mask and see what we created. So as you can see, the mask helped us keep a good portion of the areas on our card nice and crisp, but we still got this really fun style of coloring in some of the other areas. So now that we've got our images all colored, I've brought in some letter dyes, and we're going to turn this card into an eclipse card. Now I know you can't see it, but so I brought in my T-square and I drew a line so I would know where to lay the die cuts. Now we're just going to lay them down, and I'm going to secure them onto here using some delicate surface frog tape. But first, let's make sure these are all nicely lined up. So I'm just going to take a bit of the delicate surface tape and make sure our letters are nicely placed over that line that I marked. So we're going to make this a thank you card because I don't think people get those enough. But basically, any design you can make on your traditional A2 size card, you can also make on a slimline card. And now we're going to take our card front and we're going to run it through our die cut machine. Since we're doing an eclipse technique, I feel like it's best to place our cardstock piece onto some adhesive sheet. and then we can run it through the machine, and that way once we're done, there will be adhesive sheet on the back of the card front and the back of the letters, because we're going to pop the letters up to help us create that eclipse look. So we're going to place the cover back on, and then we're just going to bring out some scissors to help us cut this piece of adhesive sheet. And I like to cut the sheet after I've already attached the cardstock piece. I find it's just easier that way. So there's a little bit of overage for the adhesive sheet, but we'll take care of that in a little bit. And we're just going to run this through our die cut machine. So now we're going to remove the tape, because we need to use these die cut letters again to cut our foam sheet. So I've already got some foam sheet. This is just fun foam. So now we've got our little letters. They are all die cut out. So as you can see, as long as you go over it very gently, you should be able to remove the delicate surface frog tape from your card front without destroying the cardstock, which is important in this case because we've already colored our cardstock. So just going to die cut these letters again, this time out of our fun foam. And for this, we're just going to use some washi tape. So we don't have enough room in this sheet anymore, but we still have this sheet to die cut from. And I just like to tuck a little bit of that washi underneath itself. That way it makes it easier for me next time to tear out a strip. Now we're just going to run this through our die cut machine. So now we're just going to pull these little sheets out. We're going to place our card front onto our card base, which we've already cut and scored. First, we're going to trim off the excess adhesive sheet. Okay, so we're just going to bring in this stamp positioning tool because it has a large enough base for us to place our slimline card in. And then we're going to remove the backing off of our card front. Okay. So we're going to just do this like so. I do a similar thing to this whenever I make a card because I generally work on the card front rather than on the whole card itself. And now what we're going to do is we're going to remove our die cut pieces that were cut out of the fun foam, and we're going to place the cardstock cut pieces onto their appropriate letter. And then we're just going to, once that's done, we're going to place that into the hole that has been created by die cutting. So here's our T out of the fun foam, and here's our T out of the cardstock. So we're just going to remove the backing from the cardstock and then place that over our fun foam. Now that that's all together, we can remove the backing from the fun foam and we can place it back into this negative space that is where the T originally was. And I don't know if you can tell, so our T is now raised above the rest of the cardstock that we actually did the coloring on. Now we're just going to continue to do that with the remaining letters. So the letters we have left are the letter A and the letter O. So I'm going to show you on the letter O because I think it will be easier. So when you cut the letter O, it's basically an oval and it gives you the inside of the O also. So you want to be sure that you keep the inside of your letters if you can. I know sometimes they might be a little too small depending on the die cut you're working with, but if it's possible, it's important to keep them, because if you do, then what you can do is we're going to place the O with the foam tape in its little hole, and then, okay, so you remove the backing from the cardstock piece, then you stick it onto the foam piece, then you remove the backing from the foam piece, and then you place that into the negative space, which was created by die cutting the letter O. So now we've removed the backing and we can place that inside our letter O. So that way, now we're just going to do the same thing with the letter A. Now we're just going to we're going to remove the backing from this piece, and then we're going to stick it onto the card base. Just pop that in there. So I'm going to use this little end because, well, this circular end is actually for scoring, but in this case it's actually also kind of good for helping us to place the inside of the letter A. So we could just leave it as is with the word thank you, but we're going to heat emboss the sentiment "my friend" onto this black piece of cardstock, which we will cut down to size once I've finished stamping. So we're just going to bring this stamping platform back in. Now we're just going to bring in our powder tool. So when you're working with, at least when I'm working with colored cardstock and I'm trying to heat emboss it, I don't have really a preference for the pad that I use. So we're going to use the VersaMark Watermark stamp pad, and that's because we'll be able to see it on the colored cardstock more than we would be able to see it on white. And then we're going to bring in the microfiber cloth to make sure we apply even pressure to our stamp. And then we're just going to bring in the coffee filters. And for this, we're going to use white embossing powder. So now we can just pour that back into our jar and stick our lid. Then we can bring in our embossing gun. Okay, so that looks really nice. We're going to bring in our microfiber cloth and we're going to sort of buff out the powder from our cardstock. That way it's all nice and black again. And we can bring in a paper trimmer. So for this, we're just going to use our, well, I call this like a razor blade trimmer. And if your piece is just a little too small to trim with your paper trimmer, you can either use washi tape to hold it in place, or you can use Post-it to hold it in place. And that's what we're going to do right now. We're going to just use a bit of this Post-it to hold this in place. So there you go, there's our little strip for our sentiment, and we can just place that right here over the word you, or you could just glue it down like that, but I'm going to, you know what I'm gonna do actually? I don't have a die cut for this, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in my ergonomic scissors. So I'm just gonna try to fussy cut this out a little bit. This is one of the reasons why I love dies that I love stamps that come with dies, or I also love die cut sentiments, just because it's just, I like the look of it, but I really want to put this sentiment on this card. So that's what we're gonna do. Just means we have to do a bit of fussy cutting. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just some people are really major fans of fussy cutting and some people are like, no. I think that's part of why some people have the scan and cut. Now I don't know how that machine works actually, because I don't own one, but from what I've seen, it somewhat fussy cuts for you. If you own one, you can just tell me what it does. But yeah, I don't own one of those. As you can see, this paper has a white core. So what you can do is you can leave it as is, or you can just bring in your black marker. Don't have to use any special kind of marker. This is just a Bic Market, or you could use a Sharpie, and just trace around it pretty close. That way you get the edges to pick up the black from your marker, and then that way no one would notice it. So yeah, we can now place this above the word you, or we could glue it onto the card base itself, but I'm going to place it above the word you, and I'm actually just going to glue it down a bit. We're gonna bring in our Barely Art glue, and we're going to place that. Ooh. Okay, I think that's enough of that. And we're going to try to pull it down using the pin. Now we're going to bring in just a little more. And just remove that adhesive from our pin. And then we're going to place our sentiment right there. So that is our card for the day. I will provide links in the description box for where you can buy the products that I used today. The stamps, well, it's one stamp actually. It's a digital print. It came from Summer Quarter Designs. The letter die cut, I think, is still available, but I will also provide alternative letter die cuts. So if you like what you saw, click the thumbs up button. If you have any questions or comments, or any other style of technique video you are interested in, leave that in the description box below. And if you want to be apprised of any of my upcoming videos, click the subscribe button and that bell icon. So I hope y'all stay safe, stay healthy, stay crafty. Bye!